Yep. Yes, I can hear you quite clearly, Chris.
Okay. What about now? If we get feedback, let's see. Reverb.
Yes.
Okay. But I'm not hearing anything on the stream. I've got the stream going and there's no sound on it. What's going on there? That is strange. Is it up yet? Do you see it?
No, I haven't been notified.
Okay.
I have to look.
Okay, got it. Dr. Mulder, we're good. Okay, all right, jeez. All right, so, all right. I can hear myself and I can hear you. Okay, but people are just now starting to come back into the stream, so, all right. And my borders are all messed up. Yours look pretty good. You got to love this. We did all this ahead of time. We set it all up. It was all smooth. It was all set, and now we're a little funky. All right, folks, I also got this funny, like, Morse code I can hear in the background sound. It's kind of weird, but we can hear you. All right, folks are saying the sound is good. Ladies and gentlemen, my humblest apologies. It's not because I'm knackered and I didn't get enough sleep because I was up at 3 o'clock in the morning to do the live stream for the biker rally, but it's just because of technology. Welcome into Chris Wyatt Africa here on the Indaba Africa channel. That's right. We're here on a Saturday. My special guest on this Saturday stream is Dr. Corné Mulder, the Chief Whip of the Freedom Front Plus, and by my reckoning, the longest serving parliamentarian at the moment in South Africa. Have I gotten that right, Dr. Mulder?
That's indeed correct, Chris. Yes.
Okay. But I mean, I guess that's kind of a dual-edged sword. I don't know if that's a good thing, I suppose, because it's impressive you're the longest serving, but some people get mad at politicians for being there forever. So you probably have people happy and sad about that.
No, that's absolutely correct. The matter of fact is that politicians don't have a very good image in South Africa for various reasons. And it annoys me quite often when people just make general statements about politicians. I could have done a different career altogether, and I could have been much worse, much better off than I'm at the moment. But some people go into these things because they believe in what they are doing.
Absolutely, I understand it. It's I served, of course, in the Army for 36 and a half years, 34 of that active duty, and when I tell people that as a major, I worked at the National Security Agency, and I was, you're not allowed to be offered jobs because there's kind of a conflict there, but you could be made aware of opportunities for people with similar skill sets, if you get my meaning. And I turned down job opportunities at 4 times my salary then, and people are like, what's wrong with you? I'm like, I didn't sign up to the Army for a paycheck. I mean, I do. I love the paycheck. I have to feed myself, but I signed up because I had a sense of calling, something I wanted to do. And it sounds to me like that's why you're in politics.
Absolutely. I'm in politics for various reasons, but my family has been in politics since ever. And I also went into politics after I've completed my studies way back. And I've had quite an interesting career up to this point. I served 6.5 years before 1994, and I saw the transition process. I saw that whole process, and then I've been there since 26 years since.
That's quite a long time in Parliament. And so the party itself, before the end of apartheid, this party was organized by a former South African defense official, correct?
That's correct. The first leader of the party was General Constant Viljoen. He was the leader of our defense force before 1994. And then he came out of retirement and he got involved again in politics. And then at the dawn of the whole current process, we formed this new political party in the beginning of 1994. And we participated in the election then. And we've been in Parliament as a political party since then.
Now, the thing about the Freedom Front Plus is a lot of people, and I have an international audience, so that's why I'm asking, but a lot of people outside of South Africa aren't necessarily familiar with the party. And honestly, I got to tell you, Dr. Mulder, a lot of the coverage that you do get is not complimentary, but let me say that's the coverage. That doesn't mean that's the truth. That's the coverage you get. So I took a look at your 2019 party platform. I know some of the other parties call them manifestos, but as a person who fought communism for 30 years, it's a little uncomfortable for me to use that vocabulary. But I looked at the Freedom Front Plus's platform, and I saw people describing the party as extreme right, far right. And I looked at your positions, and I didn't really find anything there that seemed out of the norm. Most of it seemed quite closer to center, although obviously it's some conservative positions, but mostly it seemed closer to the center than any of the other parties. Have I missed something, or did I misread your party's platform?
No, you're absolutely correct. Before 1994, in our media, it was very popular to stick an etiquette around political parties, and either left or either right. No, we are not left, and we're also not right. We are a party that believes in self-determination. If you look at the name of the party, it's the Freedom Front Plus. It's about freedom. And freedom is not right or left. Freedom is about the concept of being free. And that's what we are trying to achieve in South Africa. And we've been busy with that since the beginning of the party. And we did quite well in the last election. If you take into consideration, in South Africa, we've got more than 200 political parties registered. About 37 or more participated on the national ballot. 14 made it to parliament. And the Freedom Front Plus ended as the 5th largest party in South African parliament after the last election.
Actually, I'd have to say, listen, I followed that election. Excuse me, I followed that election with great interest. Back in 1994, when I was like you, still a young man back then, but not that we're old now. Although my Paul Kruger, Pete Retief beard sort of makes me look old, but back in those days, I predicted as a young analyst, I said that South Africa, the ANC, would have a honeymoon of 3 to 4. Possibly 5, but certainly 3 to 4 elections before they'd be challenged. And I thought that by 2019, they'd face serious, stiff challenge to their suzerainty over the country. And while their vote total had dropped to the lowest ever, just over 10.5 million, they still had 58% of the popular vote in 2019. Now, I attribute that to, this is my view, you don't have to comment on this, but I attribute that in large measure to the Democratic Alliance having lost the plot for about 2 years and decided they wanted to be the ANC light. But I do have to say is that the economic freedom fighters did gain some vote totals, and the Freedom Front Plus did quite well in that election. What do you attribute to the extensive growth in that election from 2014 to 2019 that you guys did so much better?
Well, I think the electorate slowly but surely are realizing the realities of South Africa. Politics, as far as I'm concerned, is about power. Either you do have power, you don't have power. We can come back to that. And in 1994, the public were sold the dream of the so-called Rainbow Nation. This wonderful idea that we're all South Africans, we're just going to go forward. I'll come back to that as well. But slowly but surely, it became clear that there's no Rainbow Nation and there's no dream of this wonderful South Africa. And people are now faced with the realities. And what we've been saying throughout suddenly became clear to some people that may be the answer, that may be the solution. And even after the election, since 2019, with the current COVID problem and the lockdowns and things that we've had with the government, it even accelerated the things that we are putting forward. So we will be growing and doing even better in the future. And the second reason was that we succeeded in taking away 250,000 votes from the Democratic Alliance. And the reason for that was that the balloon of the Democratic Alliance was pricked for the first and final time for 2 reasons. The first one was, as you correctly pointed out, the Democratic Alliance got involved in so many internal struggles and things within their own party, and you cannot promote a quarrel. So they didn't understand that, and people move away and they shy away from a party that is fighting amongst themselves. And the second one was that the Democratic Alliance was always selling this lie that only the Democratic Alliance is strong enough and big enough to defeat the ANC. And it became quite clear, specifically in this election, that they would not succeed in doing so. And the reason for that is, if you look at our electoral system, it's a straightforward system of proportional representation. Mm-hmm. It's not a normal democracy, don't have any doubt. In no normal democracy would you have, in a proportional system, one party obtaining more than 50% on its own throughout for more than 20 years. It doesn't work that way. Proportional systems of election normally makes for coalition agreements or coalition governments. And slowly but surely we'll get to that point. At some stage, hopefully in the near future, the ANC will drop below 50%. And that will make the possibility for coalition governments to come to the fore, and the Freedom Front Plus will be there.
Well, and that's one of the things people are talking about is with elections coming up, and I have a slightly different take on than a lot of what DA people are projecting. Sorry, I am kind of knackered here. People are predicting. Sorry, I'll just say predicting. Those predicting for the future, they're talking about 2024 being coalition government and that parties may enter into it. Perhaps in 2024, but my horizon is much closer, 2021, and I want to talk to you about that. What your thoughts on that are. Before I ask you that question, what I've been telling people is that 2021, if the ANC in a legitimate election in 2021 gets more than 35% of the vote, I honestly would be a little bit surprised. Now, the longer we get away from tobacco products not being available and alcohol not being available and open-toed shoes not being available and e-commerce bans, perhaps people might begin to forget. But I think an awful lot of people are very angry and quite hot-fought. Well, hang on a second. Let me get my Afrikaans book out here. Make sure I get this right here. So, okay, there we go. Okay. No, but people are hot-fought of what's going on there. The ANC is incredibly unpopular right now, but in 2021, I've said that in the Western Cape now, this is my prediction. I don't know how you feel about this for Freedom Front Plus, but in 2021 in municipal elections, the DA should easily win Cape Town. They should win Nelson Mandela Bay, where they had a plurality last time. And if they'd only retained their previous vote, they would have had a majority. They can win Tshwane or Pretoria, and they can win Johannesburg. And in each of those places, what I suggest is they ought to reach out to coalition partners like they did previously with the Freedom Front Plus, also maybe with the Inkatha Freedom Party and the Congress of the People, if it still exists. It keeps disappearing. And maybe the African Christian Democratic Party. So for 2021, where do you think that the Freedom Front Plus sits on that spectrum? Do you guys think you have an opportunity to grow, or do you rely on a rural base, or how do you feel about the 2021 elections, I guess is the question?
No, definitely not. Let me first of all put it this way. The Freedom Front Plus is a national party that have support across South Africa. To give you an example, you've got the three parties, the ANC, the Democratic Alliance, and the EFF, who's got representation in all 9 provinces. And the next party is the Freedom Front Plus. We've got representation nationally and in 8 of the 9 provinces, provincial legislatures, and then in some of the councils. So the party will definitely grow. There's no doubt in my mind that we're going to do quite well. If I may say about the ANC, I think the ANC is in for a huge problem, and never underestimate the ANC. It's always about retaining power, and they're always busy with the balance of power and see where they are. At this very moment, they are fighting amongst each other in the National Executive Committee for the soul of the party. But it's not because they are concerned about the citizens or what's in the best interest of South Africa. It's about retaining power. So they've got their own problems, and we'll see where that goes. The other problem is that the Democratic Alliance has also got serious problems in that sense. Because the perception that they could be big enough to defeat the ANC, that has been destroyed. They've got a problem in that sense. And specifically when I come to the Western Cape, I'm responsible for the Western Cape. I'm also the leader of the party in the Western Cape. And this whole idea of self-determination and the whole idea of Cape exit, the whole idea of an independent Western Cape, a free Western Cape, is a phenomenon that is growing very strongly in the Western Cape and is going to put the Democratic Alliance in an enormous predicament. Because they will have to decide, do they support that or don't they support that? And if they do not support that, I'll predict that many of their supporters will leave the party and vote for other parties that do support the notion and the idea of a free Cape. So I predict that the Freedom Front Plus is going to do very well, and we will be part of many coalitions throughout South Africa after the election in 2021.
Actually, Dr. Mulder, I think that's a fantastic point that you've made there. I think in some, not to have pity or feel bad or feel good for them, but the DA, I think, finds themselves in a difficult spot when it comes to support for the Cape independence movement. Do they, or don't they? And I think we've kind of seen that. They've been very lukewarm and quiet about it. And I think that your point is that may cost them a lot of votes. That seems not unreasonable.
Absolutely. They've already made a fatal mistake. If you look at the Constitution of South Africa, and also the Western Cape's got a provincial constitution, it makes provision that the Premier of the province is entitled to call a referendum. So we all know that at some stage a referendum will be called for independence or for the whole idea of a free Cape. Not at this stage, and we can talk about that. But the media then asked the Premier of the Western Cape, Mr. L.L.B. from the Democratic Alliance, if he will be prepared to participate and allow that. And he answered no. And I think that's a fatal mistake, because I know, and let's see what happens. I've got an idea that there may be an opinion poll coming out on Tuesday next week that may come as a shock to the Democratic Alliance, indicating that many of their people support the notion or the idea of self-determination. And the Democratic Alliance may find that they have positioned themselves away from their own support base.
Yeah, that would seem to be quite a large problem for them. Of course, in the Western Cape, the DA has long been strong. It's been a stronghold for the party since it coalesced from former Liberal Democrats there. But a large percentage of their support comes from Afrikaans speakers in the Western Cape. And it sure seems as though an awful lot of Afrikaans speakers, Cape Coloreds and white South Africans, are interested in at least this concept of Cape independence or secession.
No, absolutely. The whole idea, the whole notion of that is part and parcel of the Freedom Front Plus policies. As I've said, we are in Africa, and you will not survive in Africa if you do not have land under your feet. If you don't have a territory that you can occupy and govern over, you will not survive in Africa. That there'd be no doubt in my mind. And I've seen, as I said in the beginning, I was there 6.5 years before 1994. I saw how the National Party collapsed and how naive they were. And I would like to say a few things about that as well. And then I saw the negotiations process, and I saw Mr. Mandela come and go, and all the others and the rest. And obviously, the ANC won't be satisfied until they've also got political power and control over the Western Cape. So it's not a question that we've got a choice. It's either we go for freedom in the Western Cape, or in that sense, or we have to leave Africa. That's the choice. There's no other choice.
Well, in fact, the ANC did gain control of the Western Cape briefly for a little bit there, and it was a disaster, an utter disaster. They, of course, in the ANC vernacular, they deployed their cadres to Western Cape, which for my international audience, let me explain that. And Dr. Mulder, let me know if you think this is wrong or off base, but in that vernacular, what they mean is that since it's proportional, you don't actually run for office or stand for office. You get on a party list, and then people vote for the party, and they pick who goes there. So while the overwhelming majority of the population ethnically in the Western Cape is Cape colored and white, it's about 60 plus 70%, almost 70% of the population, the ANC would deploy their cadres from Mpumalanga and from Limpopo and from KwaZulu-Natal, from there, party loyalists down to the Western Cape. Now, who do they owe fealty to? To the people there that they're supposed to represent, or to the party? And that was a major problem. And so they got down there and they didn't address any of the concerns, by and large, for the people in the Western Cape. So that's what happened. Did I mischaracterize that, or does that sound accurate?
No, that is what happened. But you must also remember that the ANC has never won an election in the Western Cape, not once. Yep. They came into power because they went into a coalition with the National Party before the National Party finally collapsed and the leaders joined the ANC. So it was a temporary thing, and then they were kicked out at the next election again.
Yeah, that's a good point. The head of the new National Party was Van Schalkwyk, if I remember correctly, who became the tourism minister. Here you go. Congratulations for joining our party.
Yes, absolutely. I would like to say a few things about the negotiations process as well, because it's unbelievable what happened there. And that was also courtesy of the National Party and their negotiators.
Well, very quickly, Dr. Mulder, let me get this up here. Jaco van der Merwe said, thanks, Dr. Mulder, for all the hard work that you and the Freedom Front Plus do to fight for our rights and speaking truth in Parliament. Well, that's very kind of you, Jaco. So,
yes, thank you. I really appreciate that. It's not easy. It's very easy to address a meeting somewhere in the rural area on a farm or something. It's something else to stand up in Parliament amongst all those negative guys around you who don't believe in what you believe. But it's not that difficult, because we know what we believe in, and we've got the experience, and we've got the truth on our side. And that's what's happening in the world today.
Well, listen, I have to say, I don't understand. I mean, Parliament is such a reasoned body. I watched the videos from Parliament. I mean, those lovely gentlemen who are apparently panel beaters wearing those red prison jumpsuits are so refined and dignified in Parliament. They bring such decorum to the body. Wait.
I call them the ANC's Youth League, currently dressed in red.
Well, there you go.
Because since they broke away from the ANC has not been able to create a new youth wing. That's Malema and Siwambu and all those were just ANC Youth League who got upset with President Zuma at the time. They broke away. They formed their own little party. They are fascinated by all revolutionaries around the world, and it's commander-in-chief, and it is comrade this and whatever. But that's also the reality that we have to deal with in South Africa.
No, absolutely. Frankly, I'm obviously not a South African, and you don't have to comment on this, Dr. Mulder, but it's embarrassing for me to watch Parliament and see Juju and his gang of prison jumpsuit-clad fellows running around acting the fool and trying to make points of order and don't understand parliamentary procedure, or simply don't care. They just make a bunch of noise. It is quite an interesting phenomenon. But as you pointed out, Julius Malema, Juju, and Shavumbu and these guys were all in the ANC Youth League. And, of course, they broke the cardinal rule in the African National Congress. The most important thing in the African National Congress for people who've never been a member of it or don't understand is that loyalty above all else to the party. And
absolutely. Absolutely. If you go back into what happened was the ANC never took any action against Malema for all the irresponsible things that he said. Never. They tolerated that until he criticized the president at that stage. Then they were driven out, because it's always about the ANC above anything else. That's the highest norm, and it's always about the collective, and people should understand that.
Well, and we've just seen it recently once again. So if I need to explain for my international audience, Dr. Mulder, once again, so for me as a non-South African, of course, I understood the system, but when what I call the Polokwane massacre, that's what I call it, when Thabo Mbeki was unceremoniously dumped because of his haughtiness within his own party up in Pietersburg or Polokwane, when he was dumped, and then shortly after that, he resigned as president of the country, people like, what did he do? I mean, why is he resigning? Isn't he the president? Wasn't he voted for? No, it's not actually the system that a lot of people recognize. You actually, it's sort of a parliamentary system. The parliament votes for the president. So the parliament, the ANC parliament, selected him to be president. So he was dumped, and people are like, what's going on? And we just recently saw once again that Cyril Ramaphosa said, the last thing I ever want to do is embarrass the party, the ANC. And of course, all of these folks put down their first title as president of the African National Congress. And oh yeah, by the way, president of South Africa.
That's absolutely correct. If you look at the Constitution, I quite often refer to that in Parliament and try to get the president to focus on what he's supposed to do, to tell him, you are first of all president of the Republic of South Africa and you should act in that manner. But we all know in terms of what the ANC does, he won't do anything until he's got the mandate from his own party. It's the huge collective. Everything is about the party. That's what it's all about and nothing else.
Well, for outside observers, you have to wonder if South Africa is run from the Union buildings or from Luthuli House.
It's run from the Luthuli House, no doubt. The Luthuli House takes the decisions on Mondays with the National Working Committee, and then those things go through to the Union buildings, and from there it goes back to Cape Town.
There's a question here. There's a lot of questions here, Dr. Mulder, but the one that just jumped out at me. This is from Vikas Debia, and he says, how does Dr. Mulder manage to keep so calm in Parliament with all those idiot communists? I don't know about idiot communists, but with all that misbehavior, I should say.
Let me tell you a personal story, how I managed to stay that calm. I was brought up in a political house. It was a house full of men. It was my mother, my father, and 3 brothers. My sister came way later. And my father was also in politics. He was a cabinet minister at the time, so he was away from home quite often. And then he would come home and he'd ask my mother, how did the boys behave? And we did behave like normal teenagers. We fought amongst each other and was pushing and shoving. And then my father would have a court case. And he would ask only one question, not what happened or who did what. He would just ask who lost his temper first. It was normally me, but in that way, we were programmed self-control under all circumstances. And that's what you need, because when you lose your temper in those circumstances, you say the wrong thing, you act in the wrong way. So it's always, they won't know. Inside, I will be boiling, but they won't know. And I will use other methods to intimidate them and to laugh at them and to get my point across. And that's how we do it.
Well, it sounds like you were forged in fire, so to speak, to learn how to deal with that. You know, it's oftentimes on my channel, people say I'm very tolerant of some people misbehaving on my channel who come in the chat sometimes, and they wonder how that is. Well, as a military officer, you can't just be running off and firing your weapon anytime somebody gets you angry.
Absolutely. Self-control under all circumstances. Absolutely.
So you said you'd like to talk a little bit about the National Party and how it collapsed and what was going on. Would you like to talk about that now?
I think so, Chris. I think it's very important, maybe for international audience, also to understand the problem of South Africa. It's not that simple. It's not that easy. Mm-hmm. And let me start off perhaps by describing myself. If you would ask me, who am I? Then I'll tell you that I'm not European. Mm-hmm. I'm not European. I'm an African. And if I have to speak in racial terms, I'm a white African. Why do I say that? My family came from Europe in 1685. 1685. That's long before many people went to the United States or to Australia or New Zealand or Canada. It's long before that. So after 360 years, Africa has become part and parcel of who we are. If I travel to Europe today and I walk amongst the streets of Europe and I don't say anything, I just keep my mouth shut, people will think I'm one of them. Until I open my mouth. And whether I speak Afrikaans, my mother tongue, or English, they'll immediately know I'm not one of them. And if I get back on the plane and I fly back to South Africa, when I get off the plane, I feel I'm at home. I'm back. So Africa became part and parcel of who we are. We are Africans. We are white Africans. And now the challenge is, how do we find a future in this reality of Africa? And there's a beautiful quote, and I need to bring that to your attention. It was written by Andrew Kenny, and he wrote this in 1989. It was before the whole transitional process where the ANC took over and the National Party collapsed. And he described the reality of the world as it was at that stage in 1989. And he says the following, and I quote, he says, 5 countries outside Europe are today ruled by white men from Northern Europe. All 5 at different times were part of the British Empire. The indigenous people in these countries, who were 100% of the population before the arrival of the white men, now form the following percentages. United States, 0.5%, Australia, 1%, Canada, 1.5%, New Zealand, 9%, South Africa, 81%. And then he says, these figures give a complete explanation Why the white people of the first four believe in one man, one vote, and the white people of the fifth do not. They also record the moral superiority of the Boer as an invader. Now, this deals with what happened in history. And it's very easy to say, well, democracy means one person, one vote. But if you find yourself in the African situation, in that minority situation, you cannot go for one man, one vote. It's not going to, and I'll come back to that as well. So that's why the National Party in the past came up with a different policy. And the whole policy, the whole notion of the idea of self-determination, then under another name, it was called separate development. Obviously, the ANC was fighting against that with their communist backing, and they tried to get the whole thing about apartheid. And it's this notion that created, it's only white people that are trying to act badly against the black people. And that was the whole problem. But then in 1985, the National Party at their conference in the Eastern Cape, in Port Elizabeth, Mr. P.W. Botha was then the Prime Minister, took a decision, a principal decision. And as far as I'm concerned, that was the beginning of the end. And the decision the National Party took then was to say, we have decided and we've committed in principle. South Africa is one country. All the people will be citizens of this one country with adult and universal franchise. And then it tried to qualify that within structures to be negotiated. Now, the moment when you accepted that, the end result can be only one thing: black majority government. That's it. You can do whatever you like. And I don't think he understood that. The National Party didn't understand that. And if you look back in history, it took exactly 9 years from then, from 85 until 94, when they capitulated and gave power to a black majority government. And that's basically what happened to a very large extent. And then and the reason why you couldn't do that, why you couldn't go for a simplistic one person, one vote system. South Africa is an artificially created country. Even the name, South Africa. Where in Africa? No, it's South. We've got a country with artificial colonial boundaries drawn by the colonial power in 1910 when they told the Boer republics that were defeated in the war and the two British colonies, you are now one country. And what do you call yourselves? We're all South Africans. One day, an international journalist asked me, how many people in South Africa speak South African? And the answer is none. There's no such language as South African. So we've got a very diverse society. And if you look at all the differences that exist in Europe between the different peoples in terms of culture, history, language, we've got all those differences. But we've got more. We've got racial differences. We've got first world. We've got third world, which makes it much more complicated. And then the National Party went into negotiations with the ANC. And they were quite naive in that process. For example, de Klerk then had his speech on the 2nd of February 1990 where he unbanned the ANC. And the National Party really thought that if they unban the ANC, that the local people will see how bad the ANC is, and then they will support not the ANC, but the National Party and other party. They didn't understand the basics of communism and the whole revolutionary thing. After that speech, at some stage, Ramaphosa, who now is the president, who was then the ANC's chief negotiator, said the following. He said, in his speech on the 2nd of February 1990, he thought, that's now de Klerk, that by unbanning the ANC, he would be able to control political events in our country. I don't believe that he knew that he was actually unleashing a force which he would find far, far, far beyond his own political imagination and control. And that's what happened, because the ANC does not believe in democracy. It's a tool that they use to gain control, and they will continue using that as long as they can keep control. And if at some stage it seems that they may lose control, they may change the rules of the game. Don't have any doubt. I do not believe that they are these devoted Democrats who will one day act in that fashion. They don't do that. So that's how we got to the point where we are to a certain extent. And then the whole negotiation process started.
No, I think that's absolutely a good point to bring up, is how this whole thing came about. A lot of people in hindsight today look back and say that as you said, the National Party was naive and that they were hoodwinked by the ANC. I'm not entirely convinced that that they went unwillingly. At some point, I have to question here about the resolve. I mean, there were so many things left unresolved at CODESA, the Convention for Democratic South Africa, this meeting that took place, and then the discussion about a constitution. But really what you have in many ways is something that people should be afraid of. And it's something that here in America we have checks and balances in our federal system against, and the fact that we're a union of states not a confederation,
Correct.
but a union of states. And so it's a federal system in which states are supposed to have primacy, except in the top issues. Now, that's kind of skewed over the last century, starting in World War I with the ever-growing federal government. But nonetheless, we still have a system, and there's tensions there. But what I call the tyranny of the majority. And the tyranny of the majority is that you have 50 plus 1. Well, then you get no food. We keep all the food. You don't get this. We get this. And that's kind of what you have in South Africa.
Absolutely. It brings me to the question, what is democracy? So the ANC will quickly say, but all citizens have a vote. Yeah, wonderful. What does it mean? If I have a dinner table with 6 wolves and 1 sheep around the table, and we have a nice discussion what will be for supper, and one of the wolves suggests we eat sheep, and let's take a vote. And the sheep says, I object. Absolutely, I vote against it.
Too bad.
I can assure you, we know what will be served for dinner. Now, that's not democracy.
No.
So I just want to give you another perspective. During the 1993-94 period, we went to the not the United States, we went to Europe, and we went to Switzerland, and we visited the Institute for Federalism. It was a joint delegation of the then Afrikaner Volksfront, the predecessor of the Freedom Front Plus, with the ANC at that stage. And we went there specifically to try and convince the ANC that the solution should be a bottom-up approach, exactly as you've said you've got in the United States, in terms of as much power as possible on the lowest level, and only on the federal level, the basic things that you need in terms of that principle of subsidiarity. And then in the discussions we've had, and the ANC obviously with their communist background, and they think Cuba is the best place on earth, etc., did not buy that. And then there was this one lady, a lady from Serbia. Her name was, and she has died since, but she was there, and she was a professor of the university there of Belgrado, Lydia Basta Posavec. And she listened to the discussion, and then she asked only one question. She asked us, are there common values? And the point she made was that without common values, you can't build a state. And that's exactly the point. So we came back to South Africa, obviously, and the National Party, when they collapsed and they gave power to the ANC was in charge. They won the 1994 election, and they had the majority in the Constitutional Assembly who wrote the final constitution. And then there's just 2 points I would like to make. The senior or the important man that was negotiating on the National Party side was a man called Rolf Meyer. You may have heard the name.
Yes.
So the final evening at Codesa, when the ANC and the National Party came to an agreement, and remember, they worked on the notion of sufficient consensus. So you had all the parties there, but if the ANC and the National Party agreed, it was sufficient consensus, and they proceeded. At the end of that proceeding that evening, late in the early morning hours, they had a little party to celebrate the breakthrough. And there was music played, the band was there, and they're dancing. And then Ramaphosa said the following, and this is a quote where he actually say that, and it's available on a BBC interview. He says the following. This is now Ramaphosa about Rolf Meyer. He says, I was able to see Rolf Meyer for the first time dancing on the floor where we were having this party. He was quite happy and he was quite jovial. And I kept wondering whether I would have been so happy as he was if I was in his position, having finally given in the way that they had. So the National Party in the end was so into this negotiation process, they just wanted it to get through. The irony is, this main negotiator on behalf of the National Party, and then in that sense on behalf of the whites or the minorities, what happened to him? He joined the ANC. He became a member of the ANC. Now, the equivalent would be that Jerry Adams of Sinn Féin joins the Conservative Party, the Tories in London, or Yasser Arafat joins Likud in Israel. That's what happened.
Yeah.
So there's no doubt that is why we are where we are. And after 94, when those people ran for the hills, the National Party just disappeared. Somebody had to continue because we are in Africa, we have to find a solution here. And that's where the Freedom Front Plus came in. We said, well, we've got to pick up the baton and we've got to continue where we are now. And we've become the spokesperson on behalf of those kind of issues and values that are relevant in that sense.
No, absolutely. I think they're very good comparisons. Yasser Arafat, Likud, and Jerry Adams with the Tories. That's interesting. Folks, you're listening to Chris Wine Africa on the Indaba Africa channel. And no, that's not a mistake. It is the Indaba Africa channel. I chose that name on purpose. But welcome to the stream. And welcome if you've found your way here from the aborted misstep. I don't know what was going on with Zoom or with Streamlabs, but we had to restart the stream. We're well over 200 people currently viewing this interview. Thank you so much. My guest today on the Saturday live stream is Dr. Corné Mulder, the Chief Whip of the Freedom Front Plus, an opposition party in South Africa. And we've just been discussing the history of South Africa as we got to the new dispensation, the democratic South Africa, if you want, whatever term you want to call it, for post-1994. But of course, to get to 1994, there's a few events that happened before that. And that's what Dr. Mulder and I are talking about. Dr. Mulder, I got a lot of people asking me lots of questions here, and so I'm just going to take one of these from the chat really quick before Jim's head explodes, because he keeps asking, or Jim G keeps asking this question. He's asked it like 5 times. I didn't want to go off in this direction. We can table it for later if you'd like, or if you'd like to talk about it now. But he's asked it like 5 times, and I usually don't give the squeaky wheel the grease, but I'll give him a little grease this time. He says, does Dr. Mulder see the ULA as missing any ingredient in their recipe for achieving Cape independence? Folks, the ULA is the United Liberty Alliance, which is a Cape independence movement, secessionist movement from South Africa. Dr. Mulder, do you want to field that question now, or table it for a little bit?
Yes, no, I'll deal with that. I'd like to deal with that. Let me first of all say that the Freedom Front Plus is very much in favor of self-determination. That's the cornerstone of our policy. We also negotiated with the ANC. We negotiated a accord in Afrikaner self-determination. I was very much involved in that. We, during the negotiation process, against all odds, negotiated Section 235 in the Constitution, which all these organizations now use. And it's a very positive and a good thing that there are many organizations that try to get this whole issue on the agenda and to take it further. But it's not that simple. It's not that easy. Self-determination, secession, a free Cape or a free part of South Africa is not that simple. The question is specifically about the ULA. And I don't want to criticize the ULA, but I've got a problem with 1 or 2 of the points in the following sense. And I know I watched last night your discussion with Hein Marx. I know him quite well. At some stage in the past, he was a member of our party in the Western Cape, and I know Hein quite well. My problem is this, that, and the argument is built on the following, that they say they're going the legal route by going internationally, and that they are then going through this international process, and they say it's almost completed, and they need to do these 1 or 2, 3 things, and they need some mandates, and then they can either secede or declare unilateral declaration of independence. My problem with that is it's not that simple, for the simple reason. Let me just take 1 or 2 arguments. I know it's being said that they have also exhausted already all internal remedies. It's not true. It's really not true. You cannot say that you've exhausted all internal remedies if you sent a letter to the president's office. That doesn't mean, with all due regard, with respect, it means nothing as far as I'm concerned. Part of those internal remedies would mean, have you approached the courts? Have you approached the Constitutional Court to try and enforce Section 235 of the Constitution? Have you had a referendum? Has the people expressed themselves in favor of self-determination, etc.? So the first problem I've got is they have not exhausted internal remedies. The second one, which is a bigger problem, is this. If it was really that simple, that you could just go through a specific process of secession, why hasn't the Palestinians done that? Why hasn't the Scottish done that? Why hasn't the people of Quebec done that? Why has the people of Catalonia not done that? It's not that simple that there's this little recipe and you follow these steps and then somebody blows on a trumpet and suddenly you are free. It doesn't work that way. Politics is about power. So I understand what they are doing and I welcome that, and I think it's very important, because in the end, if it's about power, you need the support of the people on the ground for what you're trying to achieve. Because even if you've got this handbook or there's this rules in terms of international law, it means nothing unless the people on the ground wants that in the majority. So you've got to, first of all, try to get the majority of people to come on board. And it's happening at the moment because of the reality of what's happening in South Africa. So I'm not saying I'm not negative about that. I'm just saying I think we should not mislead the public to create the impression that it's a done deal. It's just a question that somebody out there, I always say, neither the Pope nor Vladimir Putin, none of them are going to come here and interfere to save us from what's happening in this country. We have to look after ourselves and we have to stand up, and we can do that, but we first need to get the people on board and support what we are busy with.
Well, that's a point I'm frequently making because people come to my channel. They know I cover Africa, all of Africa, but I have a big focus on South Africa, of course. And people are like, well, what are you going to do? How are you going to help us? I'm like, well, what exactly would you like me to do other than to explain the plight of South Africans and make the world aware of it? I don't own an army, and if I did, it probably wouldn't be inclined to go to South Africa or negotiate. The world's not going to save South Africa. South Africa has to save itself, is the argument I make. It sounds like we're in agreement there. So one of the things I do on my channel, Dr. Mulder, sorry if I just have to digress, is people are able to become members of Chris White Africa and support it financially if they want. I didn't do it to make money, and trust me, it doesn't make much because the entry level is $1.99, but in South Africa, YouTube charges 10 Rand. 10 Rand is about 60 cents. After YouTube takes a third and then the federal government on this side takes their money, I get about 32 cents US for every month of membership. So it's not, but for people who become members because they want a sense of community and to support it and be part of it, plus get access to some other features. Anyway, so I had Sonia Barnard just became a member. She's been following the channel for a bit. So this is a little thing I do for new members as a military guy. So I render a proper hand salute. So there you go, Sonia. That's for you. Sorry about that, Dr. Mulder. It's just something I started doing for my members.
It's wonderful. It's a very beautiful gesture. The reality is there was a time when we could not get our messages across because of mainstream media, and they acted as filters, and they'll decide what they'll publish and what they'll allow. Modern technology now makes it possible, as your channel makes it possible, to get things across and to get people to talk to one another. And that's what we need to do.
Well, it's interesting you should say that because this morning I had a couple members ask me early in the week, so Colonel, are you going to live stream the bikers rally? I'm like, I sort of need a feed, but what I wound up doing is connecting with someone from Bora Media who they had a group and people loaded up their videos as it went. So what I did is I got up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I live streamed for 3 hours the biker rally today in South Africa from all over the country. And I even had people I know in South Africa who were like my roving reporters giving me videos, and we're playing it so people can be aware of what's happening. So yeah, you're right. Alternative media definitely does make an opportunity for people to have a conversation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's a lot of other interesting questions here, but here's one from the Joking Atheist. Some of these people have interesting, usernames and handles, but the Joking Atheist says, question for Dr. Mulder: does he believe the ANC's current agenda differs from that of Mandela when he was at the helm, or has it always just been corrupt? In other words, have they always been on the path? It's our turn to eat.
Yes, well, if you look at the ANC originally, and if you look at the Freedom Charter, for example, and the ANC is very devious in how they use the Freedom Charter. I quite often use the example by saying, the Freedom Charter says South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. And then I make the point to say, well, let's say it's true. If something belongs to me as well, then surely I should also have a say with regard to this thing that belongs to me. I've got no say whatsoever. I met Mr. Mandela, and I was in Parliament when he was president, and I saw him in action. And Mr. Mandela was a very impressive man in that sense, that he had a lot of
gravitas. Gravitas.
Yes, absolutely, and gravitas as well. That's a correct word. And he was a very good leader in that sense. But he was only he was a figurehead, he was a puppet held in front. Mbeki was behind the scenes in charge of the ANC, of the government right from the beginning. So Mr. Mandela may have had some nice ideas, but don't make any mistake. He also had a very hard and a very bitter side. It was not this wonderful saint that people create, or this man that descended from heaven. That's not correct, it's not true. He had very strange and very strong ideas in terms of the ANC. And the ANC is very good with words. They're not that good with deeds. And the wording was always wonderful, and reaching out, he could do that. But in the end, it remains the same African National Congress. The party has been contaminated right from the beginning by communism, as far as I'm concerned. The South African Communist Party has never participated in any election. But their people are in key positions within government. Their people are the think tank for the ANC. And the ANC, as someone once correctly pointed out, you want the money of the West, but you are friends with all the enemies of the United States. And that's exactly what South Africa is doing. That's the role they are playing in the Security Council. Any revolutionary, all the scoundrels, and I saw all of them. After 1994, they came to Parliament one after the other to address us. Fidel Castro was here. Yasser Arafat was here. Gaddafi was here. And then they all would say, it's wonderful to be here in South Africa and to address you in South Africa. That was not just after 94, the giant of Africa. And then I would ask my brother, who was sitting next to me at the time, he was also in Parliament, how did it come that South Africa is a giant of Africa? How did that happen? Maybe we played a role in that. And we know what happened to that giant of Africa now. We are slipping down all the way and becoming a country where we can't even keep the lights on continuously. Now, Mr. Mandela and the ANC, as far as I'm concerned, it's exactly the same thing. Mr. Mandela may have tried to prevent certain things, but at the moment, even the corruption at the moment, you cannot solve the corruption. Why not? Because it is at the heart of the ANC's policies. If the ANC policy says you have to give these contracts to black economic empowerment companies, you have to, it's not a question of getting tenders for the best service. No. You have to give the money and the tenders to a black empowered company. And what happens then is those tenders come in, they get the contracts, and then they charge 500 million for something that maybe costs 100 million. And they can't do the job. Let me give you an example. There's a military general whose wife was an air hostess. She then left the airline. She founded a small little company of her own. And what happened? She got the contract to supply the South African peacekeeping defense forces from South Africa in Africa. She knows nothing about that. She's got no experience. She's got nothing. But the tender and the money that she gets is so much that she can use that money to pay somebody else. And she then just pockets millions for herself. And the second one is obviously that the ANC, it's not wrong for them, for civil servants, to do business with the state. Ace Magashule is the one who said, there's not one leader of the ANC who has not done these things. So the ANC is rotten to the core. They are corrupt. You cannot save South Africa unless you get rid of the ANC. Simple as that.
No, I'm with you, Dr. Mulder, and you've opened up a can of worms that you and I could talk about for an entire afternoon and not even get to all of that. So I'm going to shift, if you don't mind, away from that. No. First off, I want to mention a couple things. Hein Marks is in the chat. I assume that's the real Hein Marks and not somebody using his name. Also, I don't know if you know him, but he's a ward counselor from Nelson Mandela Bay. That's Ronaldo Ros is in here. Yes. He's so welcome to Ronaldo and to Hein for joining us. So we're getting all sorts of different political parties watching the stream. That's interesting. So a lot of folks got a lot of questions coming in, and what we haven't gotten to here, and we're on 45 minutes already for this hour, and I don't know how long we'll be able to indulge on Dr. Mulder's time today, but we kind of briefly talked about the prospects for 2021. We're not really talking about the issues. We haven't even talked about the undemocratic, unelected, unaccountable, capricious National Coronavirus Command Council. We haven't even talked about that or the lockdown. And if we can get to that, we'll see if we do. But right now, I think we're talking about some very important pieces of the puzzle here about how we got to where we are and what's been happening. But let me grab a couple more things here, Dr. Mulder. Let me see this. Oh, yeah, this was a good one. This is from Louis Zede, and he said, please ask Dr. Mulder the Freedom Front's position on direct elections, if they're proposing anything or working on other proposals, and if they'll spearhead discussion in Parliament. Now, of course, this has just been, courts have just upheld that direct election is possible. In other words, you don't have to be on a party list. But to me, I'm still trying to piece this all together. It doesn't seem entirely clear. People said, oh, that means there's no political parties. No, it doesn't, in my mind. It just means that you could run as an independent. And we see here in America what that means. Independents never get elected. So I don't know what your thoughts on that are.
Exactly. No. I think it's a wrong court decision. I think the court made a huge mistake in that sense. If you go back to when the Constitution was certified by that same constitutional court, it was different judges then. They made the point that South Africa chose to exercise its political power through political parties. So we've had this notion that on local government elections, you can stand as an independent, but an independent cannot participate for the proportional vote because the independent is not a political party organization. So the only way that you can go and get a proportional independent person elected in local government is you've got to stand in a ward, democratic ward, and you've got to be so popular that you win that ward. So it has happened in a few cases. But the problem is the parties are still there. And when you get into council, you have to cooperate with the political parties. You need somebody to second any proposal that you make as an independent. So I know there's huge enthusiasm for the court case and the judgment that has now come out. And we will have to look at Parliament, how it's going to be done. And some people say, but we must now reserve certain seats for independents. It's not going to happen. parties will contest those seats as well, in whatever fashion. So let's hope that one day in an independent area in South Africa, an own free republic, which we are working for, we could look at a different electoral system. But I can assure you, if you take it to the ANC now, they will implement the system and they will draw boundaries for constituencies in such a way that they exclude basically all the parties that are not ANC.
Well, it sounds a lot like, I don't know, gerrymandering here in the United States, moving the boundaries around so you can keep people from... Well, one of the things that I've got a super chat here from Ronaldo Hollis, and I want to get to that in a second. It's a very a nice thing to say about the Freedom Front Plus for the ward counselor from Nelson Mandela Bay from the Democratic Alliance. But I'll get to that in a moment. But one of the things that the ANC has done, because I've long followed and been involved with South Africa, is that early after '94, it wasn't too long after that, they reorganized all the municipalities in South Africa and created essentially these super municipalities, super metros. And one of the impacts of that was, I tried to explain to people, is that when you have little towns that surround Johannesburg, in which you may have had a minority population in the country, say Afrikaans speaking, but they're large enough in that particular area where people who voted for that party or like mine, or maybe coloreds or Griquas voted, and you had a mayor who represented an opposition party at the national level, but locally. When you absorb all those towns, suddenly there's no mayors, there's no council positions there. They're all for Johannesburg. And so what you do by creating these super metros is you undermine democracy in the following way, Dr. Mulder. And if you disagree or you agree, please let me know. What happens here is that in order for democracy to be vibrant, you have to have people with some degree of political experience who are part of the process. Yourself, you've been in Parliament for a long time. You know how parliamentary procedures work. You understand how the government works, budgets and all that. So it's okay to have fresh blood, and we should, and it's okay to have some older blood. But if you don't have the ability for an opposition party at the local or provincial level to get into office and get experience as a government official, actually dealing with the levers of government, then what you have is the Movement for Democratic Change, who's forced into a unity government and has no idea what they're doing, and then gets blamed for all the failures in Zimbabwe. Am I off, or do you agree with that?
Oh, you're absolutely correct. That's exactly what happened, basically. The ANC basically absorbed all the different local government municipalities in these huge councils and huge metros. And the effect was that government was taken away from the people. You need government as close as possible to the people. That is what local government should be about, that you know who your councillor is, you know who is responsible for this or that or the other. And that has not happened. So it undermines democracy in that sense. And the second thing is, we pay the taxes and the ANC takes the decisions. And that's why people are correctly now saying, listen, why should we continue paying taxes for services that we don't receive? And the ANC is very sensitive about that, and they should be, because at some stage you're going to get into a tax revolt where people will say, why do I have to pay and you steal the money? It's simple as that. And people are getting to that point and the ANC realizes that. And I think that's part of the reality why they now suddenly want to address corruption. It's too late, it's too little, too late. They can forget about that. They've lost their ability or their reason to govern. It's gone.
No, I think that's fair. So let me get to Ronaldo's super chat. He said the Freedom Front Plus was 300 votes short of getting a seat in Nelson Mandela Bay Council over the PA. What's the PA? That's the other part.
Yes,
yeah.
That's
part.
The line.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. Sorry, I lost. I thought PA is an abbreviation for Pennsylvania. That threw me for a loop, and I live in Pennsylvania. So, okay. And he says, if they did, I have no doubt that Nelson Mandela Bay would be 1,000,000 times better than it is now. My positive comment about the Freedom Front Plus. So I guess the point he's trying to make here, and I know where he's going with this, is that because, of course, in my view, I don't know your view on Athol Trollip. I'm not going to ask you to comment, but I thought he was a brilliant mayor of Nelson Mandela Bay, and that they were making great changes in that city, which had suffered for a long time. But of course, it was a fractious coalition, and it fell apart, almost fell apart several times. It devoted so much. It's like Trump with the collusion conspiracy and all this other nonsense. It distracts from governance. He has to devote energy to that. Athol Trollip and his government and the council had to devote energy to keeping their coalition together that they could have better spent serving their constituents. So if the Freedom Front Plus had gotten a few more votes, then I suspect they would have gone into coalition, and it would have been a safe coalition.
Sure, absolutely. Let me thank Ronaldo for his what he's saying. He's absolutely correct. Remember now, he's referring to the last local government election. That was in 2016.
2016, yep.
And in 2019, it's a completely different ballgame. And since 2016, we've now succeeded to get a member of parliament elected for the Eastern Cape and also a member in the provincial legislature. So I can assure you that in the 2021 election, we'll get people elected to the Nelson Mandela Bay Council. Now, I just want to make the point that one also needs to draw a distinction between what I would call a minority government and a coalition government. The ideal would be a coalition government that has a clear majority and they can govern in terms of a program. The problem was in Tshwane as well as in Nelson Mandela Bay, to a certain extent you had a minority government because of the EFF. And the ideal is that we all work so hard and do so well that we can form majority coalition governments. We have got an example of that, for example, in the Southern Cape. There's a council called Hesekwa. And from day one, we went into a coalition with the Democratic Alliance, and that coalition is still governing there. Our councillor there is a deputy mayor. So that's a stable majority coalition, and I think that's a very important way that we should go. And from the Freedom Front Plus's perspective, we don't want to see more ANC government. We want to see less until no ANC government.
Well, I think at the moment you'll find probably a couple tens of millions of South Africans who would agree with you wholeheartedly at this point.
Absolutely.
It's astounding me that it's taken so long for people to, it's obviously politics. When I say identity politics, I mean, that is politics wherever you are. Whether your identity is ethnic or it's religious or it's linguistic or it's racial or whatever, or if it's party affiliation, there's some sort of identity that people tend to vote. There aren't many people who are just agnostic and walk in and go, this Corné Mulder guy looks like the best candidate. I'm going to vote for him. Of course, you don't even do that in South Africa, but you get my point. So here's a good question, Dr. Mulder. So this is from Vikas Debia. And Vikas said, and this is something I want to talk about. And actually, in the interest of full disclosure, I tried to contact a few other members of your party and had some difficulty, which is not their fault, just difficulty reaching them by the nature of reaching politicians. I haven't got a single DA politician other than Ronaldo to come on my channel, but that's a different relationship, not a political one. And I haven't gotten any from other political parties. So, but anyway, this is a question I wanted to ask the Freedom Front Plus because it seems like something that would be useful for you as a party. Why is the Freedom Front Plus so quiet on alternative media? Now, first off, you'll have to answer whether that's true or not, but from my perception, it seems that way. And this is the question. Why is the Freedom Front Plus so quiet on alternative media? Vikas says, I feel that in a country like South Africa where the media has been captured, it's an untapped resource to communicate to your voter base. I think it's a fair question.
Absolutely. I can give you the details, or I can just say, watch this space rather sooner than later.
Okay, that's cool.
We will be moving into alternative media on an absolutely professional scale within the next 3 weeks to 4 weeks.
Whoa, is that an exclusive? Did I just break an exclusive?
No, we understand the importance of alternative media and understand that that's the way to go. And we are getting the things in place to do exactly that.
And this back to the secession thing. This is from Rita Anderson. Rita said, Dr. Mulder, what are your views about there being more than one organization fighting for secession? Why not combine, stand together, and work for a common goal? I don't know. Is that a question you're comfortable answering?
Yes, sure. Yes, sure. Let me explain it in this way. We've got different organizations, which is a good thing. We've got political parties that are in favor of secession or independence in the Western Cape and elsewhere. If I think quickly, I know Cape Party is quite active trying to get into this position. I can assure the Freedom Front Plus is also active in that position, and that will be our platform that we will take forward also in the next election next year. Even in the local government election next year, although it's about local issues, we will take the issue of self-determination and secession and the need for a referendum to the electorate already next year and give them the opportunity to express themselves at the polls. And let me just say that about the referendum, and I'll come back to your question. You don't ask for a referendum until you know you can win the referendum.
Well, yeah, that's probably wise.
People should understand that. Yes, somewhere in future there will be a referendum, but not now. So we've got political parties that support this. The Democratic Alliance, I understand, is for more for subsidiarity, more powers on local level. The ACDP also now is in favor of more powers, but they have not expressed themselves in terms of secession for the Western Cape. But you correctly point out there are other organizations as well. I am aware that there's the Cape Independence Advocacy Group. I've had talks with them as well. I know that there's Cape Exit, and I know you spoke to Des Palm the other day. I also watched that discussion, and I know there's United Liberty Alliance, and there may be others. And there may be others in the Brown community and amongst the Khoi and the Sun and other groups as well. So we need to take this forward in terms of getting the majority support for this notion, but we will have different views how we should get there. What we do need is we need a body that coordinates a strategy that we do not work against each other, because in the end, we need all of them in terms of taking this whole issue forward. And if you look at what happened in the press in the last couple of weeks, suddenly this item is on the agenda. Every second day or so, there's a discussion in the newspapers. One of the journalists, Jan Joubert, published the other day something by saying it's unworkable, it's not possible. And I immediately reacted in Afrikaans newspaper, and I wrote back and I said, we are in Africa. In Africa, anything is possible. And I explained to him why it can work and why it's going to work. And since then, we've had one after the other discussions in the newspapers and elsewhere about the notion and the idea of self-determination or secession in the Western Cape. So I think it's very good that we've got the different approaches, but we need to coordinate that we do not work against each other. And some will work on the political field and others will work on the civil society field. But you have to participate on it's not a question of inside politics or outside, it's both. It's both.
Well, that's very kind of you, Dr. Mulder. I didn't want to turn this into a Cape secession conversation. We haven't, but we just addressed it a fair amount. So I think we can close the door on that for now. But folks, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube. I'm Chris in Central Pennsylvania. My Saturday guest is Dr. Corné Mulder, the chief whip of the Freedom Front Plus, one of the opposition parties in South Africa, the current longest serving parliamentarian in South Africa. So he's a graybeard, so to speak. Although I'm actually the graybeard in appearance here. But so, Dr. Mulder, there's a few other questions, but we've come up on an hour, and I don't want to monopolize your time. Are you able to stay a little bit longer, or should we wrap it up here and invite you back for a future conversation?
Chris, I don't have a problem to continue the discussion. If there's a need for that and we've got some more questions there, I'm happy to field those questions.
Oh, Dr. Mulder, there are 8,000 questions here. We're not going to take them all. Okay, so there are a lot of questions here about it. But so here's one, and I hear this a lot. And if Ronaldo's still here, I've also heard his comments on this. So now we'll shift a little bit to the lockdown. Okay, so with the ANC's undemocratic, unelected, unaccountable, capricious, that's a line I use all the time for the National Coronavirus Command Council, a secretive body, if ever there was one. They obviously the power behind the throne. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain, the great and powerful Oz. Yes, anyway, so Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, so speaking of that, there's been a lot of consternation amongst average South Africans about the ANC, of course, and their behavior and what's been happening and their hysteria over the coronavirus. And of course, taking credit for saving South Africa from corona when it has over half of all confirmed cases in Africa. And there is actually a problem there. But a lot of South Africans are upset with them. But also, I've seen a lot of South Africans that are upset with the DA. They say the DA, all they do is go to court. And then I see even some people laying blame at the feet of the Freedom Front Plus. And my response to COPE and Inkatha Freedom Party and Freedom Front Plus is that, now I'm going to give you a chance to answer this, but my response outside of South Africa is, what exactly do you expect them to do? They don't run parliament. They don't run many, if any, municipalities. So what were you looking for? Someone to jump up on top of a bucky and have a megaphone and scream about the ANC? Now, I mean, I'm not trying to set you up with a softball here, an easy pitch, but I just want to make the point that I don't really know what they're asking for. And so you get comments like one of the people here. Now, this is a little bit further, so this will give you a chance to address it. But Gavin Botts said, what has the Freedom Front done in 26 years besides earn a paycheck? So what's going on during lockdown? Is the Freedom Front doing something that people aren't aware of?
Oh, yes. That allegation is quite often used. Now, I can assure you, I'm a trained constitutional lawyer. I could have become senior counsel in the Constitutional Court, and I could earn 10 times what I'm earning in Parliament. So that gentleman is welcome to come do the job I'm trying to do and to face these people screaming at you. It's almost like the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, and the same kind of behavior. We are seeing that every day. No, what we did for 26 years basically was, and I can go back to the beginning. If it was not for the Freedom Front Plus, there would not have been a Section 235 in the Constitution. Without Section 235, it would be high treason to talk the things that we are talking about in terms of secession and breaking away and self-determination. You had to have that, and it's within our constitutional dispensation, and we have got to go that route. I think we acted as ambassadors, and people may not understand that. We were the ones in Parliament acting as ambassadors for our people out there, because there's a new generation of ANC leadership who do not know the Afrikaner, who do not know where we came from, and to try to, and I always say the ANC operates in terms of simplistic myths. And what is a myth? If you tell a lie quite often enough and you don't challenge that, then it becomes the truth. And that's what we've been doing for many, many years, to challenge those myths and those untruths that they have been telling, and the impression they try to create that all we've been doing all these years as white people. We're trying to see how we can do the baddest things possible against black people in South Africa, which is not true. Exactly the opposite is correct. So the fact is that we are playing that role, and you have to play within Parliament and outside Parliament. And some people at some stage say, no, we must walk away from politics. Many people may say, I am finished with politics. I don't want to have anything to do with it. Surprise, surprise. You may be finished. Politics is not finished with you, because where I work, they make laws that affect your life on a daily basis. They decide what taxes you're going to pay. You have to be there. And I've been brought up in a political home, as I've said. My father taught us, and he was absolutely correct. One person at the right time, at the right place, can make a difference. And you see that in politics, you see that in the military, you see that in economic situations, in any company, in sport. That's the reality of the fact. Now, if you come to the COVID situation at the moment, yes, the ANC took certain steps in the beginning, and the whole world was unsure what this COVID thing is going to entail and how it's going to play out. And some of the steps maybe were necessary, and I look at how it was handled in the Western Cape. The medical facilities was never overrun in that sense. But at some stage, the ANC had to move on and keep the economy going. And the problem was this, and I've said in the beginning, one country with no common values, with all due respect, with all these differences. And now the ANC tries to make proclamations for everybody, the same proclamations, and it doesn't make sense. So if you tell me that I'm not allowed to go to a bottle store and buy a bottle of wine to drink at home at night, it's not for the state to decide that on my behalf. And if some other people do get drunk and it's a problem with the emergency at hospital, why are you penalizing me? The same with the irrational thing in terms of smoking. I'm not a smoker, but how do you decide now people shouldn't smoke? It's not for the state to interfere in that sense. But then again, being the ANC as a centralized kind of organization, they've always think in centralization. If they can control each and everything from the Thule house, they will do that. And that's basically what happened in this instance.
No, it's absolutely insane. Excuse me, Dr. Mulder, I didn't have an intention of having a channel like this. I just retiring from active service, started a consultancy to keep busy, and not be retired, to do something interesting. It was focused on Africa, and then the lockdown came, and I had to cancel a bunch of consultancy things I had laid on. And so the lockdown was there, and I saw how crazy it was in South Africa. I know a bit about Africa, so I said, okay, I'll do this. And so it was popular, and it's grown. But it's just crazy watching what's happening in South Africa with the ANC. This is just utter nonsense. It's got to be frustrating for you guys. I mean, for all South Africans.
It's very frustrating, but there are also positive things that happened. If you look, for example, at the growth of Cape Exit in the last 3 months, and the figures are out there for everybody to see, and I think they've grown to more than 435,000 members at this stage. It's a direct result because of the lockdown. I've got no doubt, because people realize suddenly, we don't want to be governed by the ANC one day longer. And that is a huge impetus in the whole idea of secession and freedom, and I welcome that.
Now, I have a couple things here that are related, not to you, Dr. Mulder, but to the conversation. Rita gave a super chat, said, thanks for a great discussion, much respect. Well, I guess that is related to you because it's a conversation with you. But another one here from Jim G, who asked that question earlier like 6 times, and I finally asked it. He said, I say it's quite amazing your ability to construct this orchestra, given your dearth of REM sleep, because I've been up so long. So that's very kind of you. But it's a lot easier when you have an informed and a guest who's so well spoken. So Dr. Mulder, let me see what else we got here for questions from folks. Oh, there's actually something from Hein Marks. He said, Corné, yes, we've exhausted all internal remedies, and yes, we've been to court in consultation with Ramaphosa, and many correspondents prove it. It's a shame that you didn't ask him, I guess. I guess, I don't know if you guys had a conversation or not. So, but anyway, so that's Corné, excuse me, Hein Marks responded to you a little bit ago.
If I could just react to that, I don't want to go into a discussion or a one-on-one with Hein Marx at this stage, but I don't have a problem to do so.
No, that's fine if you'd like to. I wasn't trying to draw that out.
Let me answer Hein in that sense. You cannot say you have exhausted internal remedies after you have sent 1 or 2 letters to the president. The whole issue of self-determination, the whole idea of secession is only now finally getting onto the agenda. Why? You have to do the right thing at the right time. When South Africa started off, when we negotiated Section 235, when there was an accord signed on Afrikaner self-determination, I was directly involved. And it's being said that we hid that accord, which is a blatant lie. It's untrue. And we can talk about that accord as well. I know what's in there. I was involved in the formulations of that. At that stage, we were absolutely sailing against the wind. Why? South Africa was going down the route of this wonderful rainbow nation. And I've always made the point to say, why don't we succeed? Because the recipe that South Africa is trying for nation building and social cohesion is the wrong one. Why do I say that? They tried to build nation building and social cohesion around sporting events. And I understand that. It started off with the Rugby World Cup in 1995. Huge enthusiasm. Then we had the World Cricket Cup a year or 2 later. Then we had the application by Cape Town to host the Olympics, and it didn't succeed, but there was a huge support for that. Then we hosted in 2010 the World Soccer Cup. And every time there's this huge explosion of patriotism, etc., and it doesn't last. Why doesn't it last? Because it does not address the reality. It does not address the diversity of South Africa. You need to accept that and use the diversity as the building blocks to build a stable democracy. So with all due respect, you cannot write 1, 2, 3, or 10 letters to the president and then say, I've exhausted all internal remedies. It's not true. You've not been to court. You've not applied to the Constitutional Court. And even if, let's take the argument and say that you've exhausted all internal remedies, then I still question the fact there's not some force out there that's going to blow a trumpet one morning and say, yes, you've done all this, A, B, C, and D, and now you're entitled to do that. Politics and the reality in the world doesn't work that way. And then some people come from the other side and they would argue and say, yes, but our Constitution does not allow you to go for secession and freedom. I know that. Obviously, the ANC would not have a constitution that makes provision that certain parts of the country can break away. There's one constitution in the world that makes provision for that, and I know, and I think it's only that one, and that's Ethiopia. It's got a beautiful constitution that allows some of their ethnic states to break away after they've gone through a process. The ANC will never allow that. I know that. But the point is this: you don't start to build a house from the chimney, you start from the foundations. And when you get to the point, because we must also understand, technically speaking, the first prize will always be an internationally recognized, negotiated settlement. That would be the first prize. But if you can't get that, then you've got to go your own way. And you will talk to the government at that stage, but then you must be in a position to say, okay, fine, let my people go. And if you don't want to listen at that stage, then I break the chains that you try to bind me with. It's good as somebody would say, the United States should not have broken away from the United Kingdom at that stage in England because it's against the rules. So what? What rules? It's about power in the end.
Well, absolutely. It's definitely about power. There's a couple suggestions here. You don't have to respond to this, but people suggest a couple times that I should host a debate between you and Hein Marx. But we'll save that for later. But maybe that's one day when we got a bride going.
You know what? Me and Hein has had those debates. We've had.
No, I'm sure you guys have, but the audience hasn't seen it. That's the point. So,
Hein has opted for his process, and I've said what I've said about that. I think it's positive that they can get people involved and to support the notion. I have criticism of what is being put on the table, but that's their decision. It's fine.
So let's get. I got a super chat to get to, but I haven't forgotten it. The anti-Marxist ZA has asked a question. I'm going to save that for a minute, but this is one that came a little while ago. The Real Monster asked this question, Dr. Mulder. I thought maybe we should be frightened here, but it says, ask Dr. Mulder if the Freedom Front Plus has any municipalities under its belt. So, are there any small towns that the Freedom Front Plus currently has a mayorship or council control of?
No. We're in a coalition with the DA as I've said, in Esekwa, where we serve as the deputy mayor. We were in a coalition in Tshwane with the Democratic Alliance. We've had people on the municipal, the mayoral committee. We've had some people in a coalition in Johannesburg. So we've served in some of the coalitions, in some of the metros and some of the town councils. But I don't think, I think the Democratic Alliance may be in charge in the north. There are one or two of those, and in the Western Cape, obviously. But that's the reality.
Do you have any? Not to let the cat out of the bag. I'm not trying to get into your campaign stuff, but can I ask this question? Does the Freedom Front Plus have any plans for 2021 to make a push and maybe get control of some small towns or something like that? Because we talked earlier about getting experience from members of your party actually in government and.
Absolutely. Sometimes we underestimate ourselves when we talk about coalitions. Coalition is the second prize. The first prize is to gain a majority in a council and to govern. But I'm realistic about that. If we can't achieve that, but we've made our calculations. We've had a look at our figures, and we are busy at the moment on the ground. And I'm quite convinced that we will be in a situation where we will form coalitions in many councils, specifically in the Western Cape and elsewhere else as well, in the Eastern Cape and up north as well in next year's election.
All right, folks, we're not going to go too much longer. I don't want to go past 90 minutes for Dr. Mulder because we got about 15 minutes left here. We'll wrap up before then. But did have a super chat from Anti-Marxist ZA and said, what's Dr. Mulder's stance reference to the United Nations and the rolling out of their sustainable development policies set out in Agendas 21 and 30? People ask me this all the time, and I demur. I usually don't like to answer that question just because I don't like dealing with the UN.
If I may say, neither do I. The United Nations has become a talk shop for many, many years. And I serve in Parliament on the Portfolio Committee on International Relations and Cooperation, Foreign Affairs, basically. And there's always this push on behalf that the Security Council should be made more representative. It's about power. It's not about we all want to have a say. It doesn't work that way. Go and create a superpower and get involved. And it's quite sad. If I may just put this one question. There's a war out there going on, which I call an economic war between, let's say it was in the past NAFTA, but thanks to President Trump, it's now been changed, which I am very happy for that, the European Union, and then the Pacific Tigers in China and Asia. My continent, Africa, doesn't feature at all. It's irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant. And that is despite the fact that we've got the minerals, we've got the wonderful soil, we've got all the possibilities to play an absolute role, but we're not playing that role. And the irony is that I see myself and Afrikaner people and other minorities, we are committed to Africa. I'm an African. And we are prepared to play that role. And we offered that to the ANC and we said to them, we can be the bridge between the West and Europe and the United States into Africa. But the ANC never understood that. They never accepted that. They want to be, in their perception, Africa is for black people. And even they may deny that, but that's the reality. But we've got a surprise. I'm not going to allow myself to be pushed out of Africa by nobody. Not from the Eastern Cape and not from KZN or from Limpopo. No.
Well, you should. And I've lived all over the continent, Dr. Mulder. I've lived in Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Niger, Mauritania, Uganda, and Ethiopia. And Africa is full of all kinds of people, hundreds of millions of Arabs, millions and millions of white European descended Africans. You've got mixed race Africans. You've got pygmies. It's not simply a Bantu continent, which is what people look at Africa, and they're very wrong in that standpoint. So it's important. Don't be pushed away. Don't be pushed away. It's your continent. It's your home. You should not be forced away. But I will say this, Dr. Mulder, you were mentioning that your family got to the Cape in 1685, which is pretty early. My family got to Jamestown in 1621, so we got you beat.
I get that. Well done.
Yeah, the first royal governor of the Jamestown colony, Virginia, was my 17th grade uncle, Sir Francis Wyatt. So
fantastic.
So now here's a question, and I think it's a good one, but I have a sarcastic answer for it, but let's get your answer before we get past it. But Jacob van der Merwe asked, so I should ask Dr. Mulder if there's enough money in the state coffers. The answer is no, but to sustain the ANC and keep them in power, are they in any danger of not being able to pay off SASA grants and find themselves not being able to give handouts to people?
Sure. Let me answer that in a serious way then. One of our academics is Professor Jannie Rousseau from the University of Witwatersrand, and he always refers to what he calls the financial cliff. And the financial cliff is the day when we get to the point where salaries paid by the state as well as the social grants absorb the whole budget. And he always predicts, when are we going to get to that point? Now, I know that there are some ANC members in the cabinet who have said, I don't want to be in government the day that we can't pay social grants. Because it's absurd. We don't have a strong economy. As a matter of fact, we're quite bankrupt at the moment. But that's how the ANC keeps their control over the masses, by paying these social grants. And it's absolutely ludicrous. There's not enough money to do that. And the ANC has got a huge problem. That's why our debt is where it is. That is where the economy is in such a terrible state at this stage. And now, because of the ANC's own decisions in terms of COVID and the regulations, income will be down dramatically because of tax income that will not be there. And then you get this whole thing that people are starting to say, why should we pay taxes under these circumstances? Either you steal it or you don't give our services. So it's a huge problem, and the ANC has got to deal with it. It's not going to be simple at all.
That's a good point. Back to the thing you said a moment ago, you were talking about South Africa, basically my words, not yours, but the same sentiment. Africa is a rounding area for the rest of the world. People ask me about the U.S. and Africa. Why don't people? And I tell them, I said, listen, the amount of trade that the U.S. does with Africa isn't even the budget of a small, or mid-sized corporation in this country. The entire continent is $50 billion. We have thousands of companies that have more than $50 billion in annual revenue. And you have companies like Amazon that are approaching, $500 billion, $1 trillion of annual revenue.
The irony about this is the following.
Yeah.
I've had the opportunity to travel to a number of countries in Africa. And what did I find? I find people who are way, way beyond colonialism, who have moved on and are trying to make things work successfully in Africa. And I've always said South Africa could play a leading role by being the locomotive to pull the whole thing forward in Africa, and Afrikaner people or the white community and other minorities can play an essential pivotal role in that sense. Our problem is one thing, the ANC. The ANC is the problem. They are still full of Marxist and communist ideas, and they are still dreaming about the communist utopia in terms of how things should be, blah, blah, blah. Just imagine the wonderful development that can happen in Africa in terms of power development, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the vast agricultural possibilities, minerals. The sky is the limit, and I'm enthusiastic about that. But we still need to get rid of the ANC first to get to that point. So maybe things look not all that bright today or tomorrow, but I'm always positive there's a bright future waiting also in Africa.
It is interesting. If you go back to, say, 1994, 42% of all electricity generated, the entire continent of Africa was generated by Eskom in South Africa. And 42%. South Africa was a colossus. Its economy was nearly three times as large as its nearest competitor in Africa in 1994. And today, Nigeria, which has got a lot of its own problems, far surpasses. It's twice the size of South Africa's economy. And Eskom delivers at best 60% of installed capacity at any moment in time. It's very embarrassing. And education levels have gone from not great for everybody to abysmal for everyone. You have 30% pass rate on matric. I'm embarrassed for South Africa. I don't want a structural engineer to build a bridge for me who got 35 in math.
The reason for all the things that you mentioned are policies of the African National Congress. That's the reason.
Yeah, well, not to put you on the spot, and you don't have to respond to this, but I'm in the habit of calling them the angry, naughty children, but that's just me. So,
it's very, and how naive could you have been, with all due respect to the National Party, to think? I've said politics is about power, and the problem was, why did they do that? Why did the National Party, amongst other things, do this? You know why? The leadership of the National Party in 1994, none of them were ever in opposition. They were always in government. You have to be in opposition. You have to know what it's like to be without political power. Then you understand what power is about. But they've never been in opposition, so the whole approach was, we've got power, you also want power. You can also have some power. And they didn't understand. And then they came up with this whole notion of a government of national unity. Yes, that's a different discussion.
Well, Dr. Mulder, you have been incredibly generous with your time and also quite understanding for a couple little prickly questions that my audience had there, but I think wasn't too
No
deep.
problem.
But what I'd like to do is I'd like to close out. And before I do, first off, I'm going to extend an invitation to come back on the channel, and maybe we could talk more specifically about the 2021 and the lockdown and what the party's doing, and maybe in a few weeks after this, I guess my exclusive with this announcement about alternative media, maybe we can talk a little about that. But you're welcome to come back. You don't have to commit here on the air, but you're welcome to. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to give you a chance to share anything with us, either about what's going on or the future or hope or concern for South Africa, whatever you'd like to share with us before we go off. And then I'm going to put you in the waiting room and ask you if you can indulge me to wait a couple minutes while I close out the stream and then just have a quick conversation with you. Is that okay?
That's fine, Chris. Thank you very much. Let me start off by saying thank you to you and your channel. It's been a huge privilege for me to participate in this discussion, and I want to say thank you very much for all your viewers and your listeners out there. It's always a privilege to speak to other people, and I'm the last one that want to create the impression that we've got all the answers. It's not that simple. It's much more complicated than that. But I think if we talk to one another and we discuss things, we may come to the real answers and come to the real conclusion. So I want to say thank you very much for the kind opportunity. And it will be a privilege and honor for me if you want to participate in future discussions or whatever you may have in mind. No problem whatsoever. Let me end by saying the following. My family has been involved in politics all my life. We're a dynasty in that sense. My father was in politics. He was defeated with 6 votes to become the Prime Minister of South Africa in 1978. His father served in the Transvaal in the Provincial Council. And his father, my great-grandfather, served in Paul Kruger's Volksraad in the Parliament of the Transvaal Republic. So we've been involved in politics throughout our lives. Why? To make a difference. So here I am today. I'm a grandfather. I've got 2 grandchildren, 2 young boys. And I've got to ask myself, what is their future going to be like? What is going to happen to them? What future can they expect to have? And that's what we are busy with. So if people say, what have you been doing? That is what we've been doing for the last 26, 32 years. I'm trying to create a future for our people in Africa because we're entitled to do that. What we need to do is we need to take hands, we need to stand together, we need to have each other's backs and understand what are we up against. Don't ever underestimate the ANC. The ANC fought for many, many years to get into power. They are not going to relinquish power voluntarily. Know that. So there will come a time that we will have to stand up and look after ourselves. But then we must know the facts, we must know where we are going to. And I am a positive. I'm positive, I'm an optimist all my life. I see a wonderful, bright future in South Africa, not only for the Afrikaner people, not only for the white people, also for the colored community, which we talk about as the brown community, the Khoi, the San, and other minorities. And also for those black people who are good, common folk who want to have a better future for their children. But then we have to stand up and defeat the radicals, the revolutionaries, the communists, and the bad guys who are currently in charge of this country. We need to do that. We will not do it on our own. We have to take hands and succeed. I'm positive. I'm optimistic of what we're going to achieve. And I'm looking forward to a bright future. And I'm playing my role within a political party that has made a difference. And I can assure you, you watch the election results of 2021 and you'll be amazed of what we will be achieving in the next few months. Thank you, Chris. Thank you for the opportunity.
Oh, it's my absolute pleasure, Dr. Mulder. Appreciate it very much. Excellent words, really, by Donkey for that. I appreciate it. By the way, before you go, I should mention that because I wear on all my programs, I don't know if you don't know if you're aware of this, I always wear a rugby jersey, and today I wore a Blue Bulls jersey, even though I'm a Stormers fan. And I know you're in the Western Cape right now, but rumor has it that you're a High Veld guy and you're kind of a Bulls fan.
But if I may confess, and I hope that the members of my party in the Western Cape are not watching at the moment. I was brought up mainly in the Transvaal in Pretoria. I was there at school in Pretoria, and obviously my team would be the Blue Bulls. They haven't played that well recently.
But it's going to change now. Jake White makes some big signings.
It's going to change. The Western Cape is playing. The Stormers are playing beautiful rugby as well. Last night I saw that you had the number 11 on your back. My number was 14. I was a right wing. way back. So rugby is a beautiful sport and it brings the best out of all of us. But thanks again for the discussion tonight and for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
No, it's my pleasure. You're right. I have 11, of course, because I'm left wing. You were alluding to the right wing. And I don't think a lot of people know this, but I have a 2019 Rugby World Cup because I spent a month in Japan for it. And of course, I have 11 and my name on the back there and I'm still angry at Rossi Erasmus because most people don't know this, but Makazole Mpipe was not supposed to be the choice at left wing. It was supposed to be me, but I twisted an ankle and he dropped me from the squad. So I'm just saying.
I can just imagine. Indeed.
All right, Dr. Mulder, thank you very much. I'm going to put you in the waiting room. I'm going to close out and I'll be back with you in just a couple minutes. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much.
All right, God bless. Okay, that's Dr. Corné Mulder, ladies and gentlemen, who has been my guest today here on, whoops, I got to fix the screen real quick so you guys don't get vertigo there. And there we go. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. It's been quite a long day for me here on Chris White Africa, what with doing a live stream of the biker rally for bikers against farm murders and racism in South Africa, and now making several videos to highlight that after the fact, and then also this stream with Dr. Mulder. I'm very grateful for him being my guest today. I will be back on, yes, one more time today to do the Stray Voltage Night Owls edition to answer any questions about this conversation with Dr. Mulder and talk about the events of today, which were quite epic, folks. Thousands and thousands of motorcyclists and all peaceful gatherings, with the exception of some nonsense that happened in Cape Town, which appears to be precipitated by the South African Police Service. Can't state that unequivocally, but there was a bit of nonsense in Cape Town, but everywhere else it was peaceful and well handled. Anyway, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. If you're a new subscriber to the channel, thank you. Welcome for coming aboard. If you're with the Freedom Front Plus, check out our channel. You'll see that you get a fair shake here. If you were just here for the conversation, thank you for coming along. Folks, I'm going to close out here now so I can finish business with Dr. Mulder. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the channel today. I'm sorry, I'm trying to find my closing video. I've got so many things set up in here now that I get lost at the end. So where is my closing video? There it is. All right. Okay, folks, thanks a lot. God bless and have a pleasant day. And as Big Daddy Liberty says, never trust a commie. As Chris Wyatt says, never trust a cadre.